Picture this: a quiet morning, coffee in hand, and then, bam! Karen, the HOA's self-anointed queen, storms my yard like a general claiming a prize. No warning, no shame, just her striding through my garden, her heels crushing my pride. She's not alone. 2 lackeys wheel away my woodpile, my hickory, chopped through sweat and storms, my winter's heart. It's not just logs, it's my labor, my sanctuary. And there she goes, loading it into her golf cart, waving like she's borrowing sugar. "Thanks for the donation," she chirps, her smile a dagger dipped in honey. I'm frozen, my brain a fritzing circuit. Who does that? Who steals a neighbor's soul and calls it charity? Karen. That's who. HOA tyrant, suburban Caesar, a woman who thinks rules bow to her pearls. This is the story of how she took my firewood thinking she'd won, and how I turned her theft into her downfall. She didn't know I had a plan, a friend named Frank, and a silent army of termites, ready to chew her empire to dust. From her smug bonfire to her crumbling pergola, from HOA meetings to her final defeated glance, this is a tale of justice, slow, sharp, and satisfying. Can a few bugs topple a queen? Stick around, because Karen's about to learn. Steal from a neighbor, and you'll burn your own throne. The neighborhood watched, and I smiled, knowing sometimes the sweetest revenge is a whisper carried on 6 tiny legs. Leave a comment below letting us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we will have another incredible story. My coffee went cold as I tried to process the absurdity. Karen's trailer rattled down the street, my wood bouncing like hostages in a heist. I looked around, half expecting a hidden camera crew to leap out, yelling, "Gotcha!" But the street was empty, the morning sun mocking my shock. This was real. Karen, the HOA tyrant who fined people for untrimmed hedges, had just waltzed onto my property and claimed my firewood as her own. My wood pile wasn't just logs. It was 2 winters of labor, of swinging an axe until my hands blistered, of stacking each piece like a puzzle to keep it dry. It was my sanctuary, my defiance against the HOA's clipboard-wielding reign. And now it was gone, carted off by a woman who saw neighbors as pawns in her suburban empire. I stumbled back to the porch, my mind a tornado of questions. How did she justify this? Did she think I wouldn't notice? Or worse, did she know I'd notice and just didn't care? Her wave replayed in my head, that smug saccharine gesture, like she was borrowing a cup of sugar, like stealing my soul's kindling. I wanted to scream, to chase her down, but my feet stayed rooted, my robe a flimsy shield against her audacity. The neighborhood was still, but inside me a storm was brewing. Karen had crossed a line, and I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I was a man whose pride had been plundered. What would you do when someone takes what's yours and calls it charity? I couldn't stay still. Barefoot, robe flapping like a battle flag, I marched to Karen's house, her backyard already a stage for her latest HOA spectacle. Folding chairs circled tiki torches, a mockery of a tropical paradise, and there, by her gazebo, my woodpile sat, stacked like a trophy. Karen stood directing her minions, her pearls glinting like armor. "I was going to leave a note," she said, not even blinking as I approached, my anger a wildfire she couldn't see. "It's for the HOA bonfire, a community cause." Her voice dripped with condescension, each word a nail in my patience. "Karen," I said, my voice shaking like a fault line. "That's my wood, on my property, for my fireplace." "You can't just take it," she laughed, a sound sharp as broken glass. "Oh, relax," she said, waving me off like a pesky fly. It was an eyesore, violating HOA Code Section 7, too high, too visible. "I'm saving the community money," she clapped, proud as a peacock, her eyes daring me to challenge her crown. My mouth opened, but words failed, drowned in the absurdity of her logic. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft, dressed in a blazer and a smile. She turned back to her workers, barking orders to stack the logs. Near the gazebo for the marshmallow roast. My wood, my labor, reduced to a prop in her re-election campaign. I stood there, a knight without armor, watching her empire gleam. Could she really believe she was untouchable? I trudged home, my bare feet stinging on the asphalt, my heart a furnace of rage. Karen's backyard glowed in my mind's eye, a stage where my stolen wood would fuel her glory. Neighbors would gather, toasting marshmallows over my labor, praising the hickory scent, while Karen basked in their applause. The injustice clawed at me, a beast I couldn't tame. I called the HOA hotline, my voice steady but desperate, only to hear the same tired refrain. It's a civil matter. The police were no better? Their words a shrug over the phone. Work it out with the board. I sank into my couch, staring at the empty spot where my woodpile once stood, a wound in my yard's heart. But in that silence, a seed took root, not of vengeance, but of justice. Karen thought she could plunder and prance away, her crown unchallenged. She didn't know I wasn't just a neighbor with a woodpile. I was a man with a memory, a favor owed, and a friend named Frank. Frank, the pest control wizard who owed me for saving his business from a beehive apocalypse years ago. His voice echoed in my mind. Anything you need, I'm your guy. A spark flickered in the ashes of my anger. Could I turn her theft into her downfall? The thought was a whisper, but it grew louder, sharper, until it was a plan. Karen had lit a match, but she didn't know it would burn her empire to the ground. As dusk fell, Karen's backyard came alive, string lights twinkling like stars in her stolen kingdom. Neighbors arrived, their laughter a dagger in my chest, their voices praising the rustic charm of my wood. I watched from my window, my mug nearly cracking under my grip. Karen stood at the center, a queen holding court, her bonfire blazing with my hickory, its smoke curling like a taunt. She thought she'd won, that her HOA scepter made her invincible, but she didn't know the storm brewing in my heart. I wasn't just angry, I was awake, my mind a chessboard where every move was calculated. Frank's number glowed on my phone, a beacon in the dark. I didn't want war, not the kind that leaves scars. I wanted justice, the kind that creeps silently, like shadows before dawn. Karen had taken my wood, my pride, my peace, but she'd also given me something, clarity. She wasn't a neighbor, she was a thief, cloaked in community pride, and thieves, no matter how shiny their crowns, always fall. I dialed Frank, my voice calm as a frozen lake. I need your help, I said. His laugh was a promise, a key to a door I hadn't yet opened. What did Karen know of consequences? Nothing, not yet, but she would. Oh, she would. The night stretched on, her bonfire fading to embers, but in my heart a new fire burned, one that would light her downfall and leave her kingdom in ashes. Karen's backyard was no mere yard, it was her kingdom, a stage where she played pharaoh to our suburban Nile. That morning, as I stood in her domain, my robe a tattered banner of defeat, I saw her empire in full glory. Tiki torches stood like sentinels, folding chairs bowed in rows, and my stolen woodpile gleamed by her gazebo, a monument to her conquest. She moved with the grace of a dictator, her pearls a crown, her voice a scepter. I was gonna leave a note, she said. Her smile a blade dipped in honey. It's for the HOA bonfire, a community cause. Her words were a hymn to her own greatness, each syllable dripping with the arrogance of someone who'd never heard no. I stared, my heart a drum of rage, as her workers stacked my logs like offerings to her throne. Karen, I said, my voice a cracked shield. That's my wood, on my property, for my fireplace. She laughed, a sound that danced like broken chimes. Oh, relax, she said, her hand dismissing me like dust. It was an eyesore, HOA Code Section 7, too high, too visible. She clapped once, sharp as a gavel, proud as if she'd just solved world hunger. My wood, my labor, was now her trophy, her bonfire's heart. Who was this woman, this suburban Caesar, to claim what wasn't hers? Her backyard glowed, but to me, it was a pyre of injustice, and I was burning. Karen's audacity wasn't just bold. It was a wildfire, consuming reason in its path. She turned from me, barking orders to her workers. Stack the logs near the gazebo, we're going full rustic for the marshmallow roast. My wood, seasoned through storms, was now a prop in her HOA re-election campaign, a tool to woo neighbors with her community spirit. I tried to speak, to pierce her armor of smugness, but my words were arrows against a fortress. You can't just take it. I said, my voice trembling like a leaf in a gale. She spun, her eyes narrowing, but her smile never wavered. "I'm saving HOA funds," she declared, as if thrift were her holy grail. "Your pile was a violation, an affront to community harmony. I'm doing you a favor." A favor? Stealing my pride, my labor, and calling it charity? Her logic was a twisted vine, choking truth in its coils. I stood there, a peasant in her court, watching her workers carry my logs like spoils of war. Neighbors began to arrive, their voices a chorus of ignorance, praising the hickory charm of her bonfire. Each compliment was a lash, each laugh a wound. Karen basked in it, her pearls glinting like stars in her self-made sky. She thought she was untouchable, a queen whose scepter was HOA code. But queens fall, don't they? When their crowns are built on stolen gold, their thrones always crack. That night, Karen's backyard transformed into a suburban Eden, a Pinterest dream spun from my stolen wood. String lights twinkled like captured fireflies, hay bales posed as rustic thrones, and my hickory burned in her bonfire, its smoke curling like a serpent's whisper. Neighbors gathered, their laughter a symphony of betrayal, toasting marshmallows over my labor's ashes. Karen stood at the center, her blazer a royal robe, her voice a decree. "Welcome to our community roasts," she proclaimed. Her words a velvet glove over an iron fist. I watched from my window, my mug a fragile shield, as they praised the authentic hickory scent. Authentic? It was my heart burning, my winter's work reduced to a backdrop for her glory. She mingled, her laughter sharp as a blade, her eyes scanning for dissenters. None came. The neighbors, lulled by her charm, were blind to her theft. "It's for the community," she'd said, and they believed her, drinking her lies like cheap wine. My rage was a furnace, but my calls to the HOA hotline and police were met with shrugs. Civil matter. Civil? This was war. Waged with smiles and bonfires, Karen thought she'd won, her empire glowing in the firelight. But what does a queen do when her throne is built on sand, when the ground beneath her shifts? I closed my curtains, my heart a drumbeat of resolve. Karen's fire burned bright, but mine was just beginning to spark. I sank into my couch, the glow of Karen's bonfire seeping through my blinds like a taunt. My woodpile's absence was a hole in my yard, a scar on my pride. Each crackle from her fire was a reminder. She'd taken more than logs, she'd taken my peace. But in that darkness, a light flickered. Karen's arrogance wasn't just a flaw, it was a crack in her armor, a chink I could exploit. She thought she ruled the neighborhood, her HOA code a holy writ. But rules are only as strong as those who enforce them, and Karen had underestimated me. I wasn't just a neighbor with a woodpile, I was a man with a memory, a favor, and a friend named Frank. Frank, the pest control maestro, owed me for saving his business from a beehive nightmare. His words echoed, "Anything you need, I'm your guy." A plan began to form, not of vengeance, but of justice. A silent, creeping justice that would topple her throne without a shout. I didn't want to burn her world down with fire. I wanted it to crumble from within, like a castle eaten by time. Could I turn her theft into her undoing? The thought was a seed, sprouting in the ashes of my anger. Karen's bonfire blazed, but it was a beacon of her hubris. She didn't know the shadows were gathering, ready to swallow her light. As Karen's party faded, the embers of my wood glowed in her yard, a mockery of my loss. But in my heart a new fire burned, not of rage, but of purpose. Karen thought she'd danced away, her crown untarnished, her theft a triumph. She didn't know I was no longer the man she'd waved at, no longer the neighbor she could dismiss. I was a storm waiting to break, a tide ready to rise. I picked up my phone, Frank's number a lifeline in the dark. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady as stone. His laugh was a spark, igniting the plan that would shift the ground beneath her. What did Karen know of consequences? Nothing. She thought her HOA scepter made her invincible, her backyard a fortress. But fortresses fall when their foundations rot, and I had just the tool to start the decay. The night stretched on, her laughter a distant echo, but in my mind the game had begun. Karen had lit a match, but she didn't know it would set her world ablaze. I closed my eyes, the Plan A map in my heart. Tomorrow, her empire would begin to crack, and she'd never see it coming. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't a shout. It's a whisper, carried on the wings of a termite. Rage is a fire, but justice is a river. Calm, relentless, carving stone in silence. After Karen's bonfire, I was no longer a man consumed by flames. I was a strategist. My heart, a forge where anger became resolve. Her theft wasn't just a loss. It was a gauntlet, a challenge I'd answer not with shouts, but with cunning. I sat in my living room, the empty space where my woodpile once stood, a silent accusation. But in that silence, a name surfaced. Frank. Frank, the pest control wizard, my fishing buddy who owed me a debt deeper than the lake we cast lines into. Years ago, I'd saved his business from a beehive catastrophe, and his promise lingered like a vow. Anything you need, I'm your guy. I dialed his number, my voice steady as a drawn bow. Frank, I said, I need something special. His laugh was a thunderclap, a signal that the game was on. You want the premium stuff? He asked, his voice dancing with mischief. Drywood termites, no smell, no mess. They'll hollow out her world like a silent army. Termites. The word was a spark, igniting a plan as elegant as a waltz. Karen thought she'd plundered my pride and danced away. She didn't know I was choreographing her downfall, step by silent step. Could a few bugs really topple a queen? In my heart, I knew they could. Frank's voice was a melody, each word a note in the symphony of my plan. These termites, he said, are stealth soldiers. They dig in quietly, hollowing wood from the inside. Give them a week and her backyard's a buffet. I leaned back, the idea blooming like a dark flower. Not war, not vengeance, but consequences, a lesson Karen had never learned. She'd bulldoze through life, her HOA code a battering ram, her smile a shield. But shields crack and rams falter when the ground shifts. My plan was simple, give her what she wanted, more firewood, but laced with a gift she'd never suspect. I'd play the good neighbor, the team player she mocked me for not being. How do we do this? I asked Frank. His chuckle was a map, guiding me through the shadows. I'll deliver a batch of infested logs, he said. You get them to her yard. She'll stack them herself, thinking she's won. The beauty was in the deception. Not a lie, but a truth she'd discover too late. I imagined her pergola, her pride, crumbling under the jaws of tiny invaders. Karen thought she was the hunter, but she was the prey, lured by her own greed. My heart raced, not with anger, but with the thrill of a game she didn't know she was playing. What's more poetic than letting a thief build her own trap? The next morning, I stood at the mailbox, my face a mask of humility. Karen approached, her eyes narrow, sniffing for weakness. You know, I said, my voice soft as a breeze, you were right about that wood pile. It was an eyesore. If you need more for future events, I can contribute. Her smirk bloomed, a rose of smugness. Maybe you're learning to be a team player, she said, her pearls glinting like a victor's crown. I nodded, my heart a drum of secrets. That afternoon, Frank arrived, his truck a chariot of justice. He unloaded a stack of logs, their surfaces pristine but their hearts alive with termites, silent warriors ready to feast. These are the good ones, he winked, his voice a conspirator's whisper. I had them delivered to Karen's yard, a gift wrapped in her own arrogance. Her workers stacked them by her pergola, her throne of HOA glory, unaware they were building her ruin. Karen clapped, delighted, her laughter a fanfare of ignorance. Perfect for the next mixer, she crowed, imagining wine and firelight. I watched from my porch, my coffee warm again, my soul alight. She thought she'd won, her empire secure. But beneath her feet, the ground was shifting, the termites waking, their jaws a chorus of doom. Did she suspect the gift she'd accepted was her undoing? Not yet, but the dance had begun, and I was leading. As the sun set, Karen's backyard glowed with the promise of her next triumph. She planned a wine-tasting mixer, her pergola adorned with silk ribbons, my infested logs stacked like a crown jewel. I stood at my fence, watching her workers bustle, her laughter floating like a taunt. She thought she was untouchable, her HOA scepter a wand of control. My plan was a seed, planted in silence, its roots already spreading. The termites were invisible, their work a whisper in the wood, but I felt their power, a tide rising beneath her empire. I didn't need to shout or fight. I'd given her exactly what she wanted, and she'd taken it with glee. The irony was a blade, sharp and sweet. Karen's greed had built her trap, and now she was dancing in it, oblivious to the cracks forming under her feet. I sipped my coffee, the night cool against my skin, my heart a metronome of patience. What happens when a queen builds her throne on stolen sand? She falls, not with a crash but with a sigh, as the ground gives way. I closed my gate, the plan afire in my chest. Karen's mixer loomed, but so did her reckoning. The termites were marching, and I was their silent general, waiting for the dawn. The morning broke, sunlight pouring over Karen's yard like a spotlight on her ignorance. Her pergola stood proud, the infested logs a silent bomb at its heart. I watched from my porch, my coffee a toast to the storm to come. Karen was glowing, her plans for the mixer a tapestry of arrogance, wine, jazz, fairy lights, all fueled by my stolen pride. She thought she'd tamed me, turned me into a cog in her HOA machine. She didn't know I'd slipped a wrench into the gears. Frank's termites were my allies, their jaws a symphony of justice, chewing through her world while she dreamed of glory. I didn't want revenge, not the kind that scars the soul. I wanted her to feel the weight of consequences, a burden she'd never carried. Her backyard was her stage, but the script had changed, and she was no longer the star. I leaned back, the plan a melody in my mind. Karen's laughter would soon turn to screams, her crown to dust. Did she know the fire she'd stolen would burn her down? No, but she would. The termites were awake, their hunger a tide, and I was content to watch the waves rise. The mixer was days away, but the collapse was already beginning, silent as a shadow, sharp as a blade. Dawn broke like a curtain rising on Karen's downfall. Her backyard, once a fortress of HOA pride, was now a battlefield where termites waged their silent war. I stood at my window, coffee in hand, watching sunlight bathe her pergola, its beams hiding a secret army. The logs I'd gifted her, stacked like a king's ransom, were alive with destruction, their cores a feast for Frank's stealth soldiers. Karen was oblivious, her laughter floating from her yard as she planned her wine-tasting mixer, a gala to cement her reign. She thought her empire was eternal, her pergola a monument to her glory. But empires crumble when their foundations rot, and Karen's was rotting fast. I imagined the termites, their jaws a chorus of chaos, chewing through her world while she danced in ignorance. Her gate sagged, its hinges groaning like a warning she ignored. Her husband, drill in hand, muttered about cheap lumber, blind to the truth gnawing at their kingdom. I sipped my coffee, the morning cool, my heart warm with anticipation. Karen thought she'd stolen my pride and won. She didn't know her victory was a house of cards and the wind was rising. What happens when a queen's throne is eaten from within? She falls, not with a scream, but with a stumble. And I was ready to watch every step. The week unfolded like a slow-motion disaster, each day a crack in Karen's facade. Her pergola, her pride, began to tilt, its posts dusted with termite droppings, a fine powder she mistook for dirt. I walked by, waving innocently, as her husband wrestled with a sagging gate, his curses a symphony of frustration. "Bad lumber," he growled, unaware the lumber was fine. It was the invaders within. Karen, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of plans, her mixer looming like a coronation. She thanked me again for the firewood, her voice dripping with condescension. "Didn't think you had community spirit," she said, her pearls a crown of smugness. I nodded, my smile a mask, my heart a drum of secrets. The termites were relentless, their work invisible but devastating. Her backyard, once a stage, was now a trap, its beauty a lie. I stood at my fence, watching her hang silk ribbons, oblivious to the dust at her pergola's base. Each ribbon was a bandage on a wound she couldn't see, each laugh a step toward ruin. Neighbors noticed, whispering about her gate, her posts, her bad luck. Karen brushed them off, her smile a shield. But shield's dent, and hers was cracking. Could she feel the ground shifting, or was she too drunk on her own power to notice the quake? The night of Karen's mixer was a spectacle, not of glory, but of collapse. Her backyard glowed with fairy lights, jazz humming like a lullaby, guests sipping wine in blissful ignorance. I stood at my hedge, unseen as the termites played their final act. First came the chair, a guest sat, and it buckled, splintering into a pile of dust and spilled Chardonnay. Laughter turned to gasps, Karen's smile freezing like ice on a river. Faulty screws, she snapped, blaming the manufacturer, her voice a whip. But the cracks kept coming. A decorative wine barrel, filled with ice, split open like a cracked egg,
flooding her patio, soaking her tablecloth in a wave of chaos. Guests shrieked, her husband cursed, and Karen's composure crumbled like her wood. "It's the supplier," she cried, her pearls shaking like a storm-tossed ship. The crowd whispered, some leaving, others staring at the pergola, its tilt now visible under the lights. Termite droppings dusted the ground, a silent confession of her theft. I watched, my heart a bonfire of satisfaction as her empire unraveled. She didn't know her stolen wood was her undoing, her mixer a stage for her fall. How long could she deny the truth gnawing at her throne? The party ended in whispers, guests slipping away like shadows, Karen's laughter replaced by frantic excuses. Her backyard, once a beacon, was now a crime scene, its wreckage a testament to her hubris. I returned home, the night quiet, my soul alight with justice. The termites had done their work, but the show wasn't over. Karen's pergola leaned like a drunken king, its beams bowing under the weight of her greed. Her gate was a ruin, her post a graveyard of dust. Neighbors talked, their voices a tide of doubt, questioning her reign. She'd blamed vendors, lumber, anything but herself, but the truth was a seed sprouting in their minds. I didn't need to speak. Her collapse was my voice, her failure my song. The HOA board stirred, whispers of an emergency meeting spreading like wildfire. Karen's crown was slipping, her scepter broken, but she clung to it, a captain on a sinking ship. I sipped my coffee, the dawn a promise of reckoning. What happens when a queen's lies are exposed? When her throne is dust? The termites had carved the path, and I was content to watch her walk it. The meeting loomed, and with it, the final act of her empire's fall. Morning broke, the neighborhood buzzing with the aftermath of Karen's mixer. Her backyard was a ghost town, its lights dim, its chairs scattered like fallen soldiers. I stood at my porch, my coffee a toast to the chaos I'd sown. Karen was unraveling, her smile a mask, her voice a tremor. She'd planned a triumph but reaped a disaster, her stolen wood the spark that lit her downfall. The termites were my ally, their jaws a chorus of justice, hollowing her world while she dreamed of glory. I didn't need to shout or fight. I'd given her a gift, and she'd built her ruin with it. Neighbors whispered, their trust in her eroding like sand in a storm. The HOA board's meeting was set, a tribunal for her sins. Karen thought she could dance through the wreckage, her pearls a shield. She didn't know the ground was gone, her empire a shell. She couldn't know the ground was gone, her empire a shell. I leaned back, the plan a melody in my heart. The termites had struck, but the real blow was coming, not from bugs, but from truth. Did she sense the storm gathering? No. But it was here, and I was ready to watch it break. The neighborhood waited, and I smiled, knowing justice was a fire no queen could extinguish. The morning after Karen's mixer, the neighborhood was a coliseum, its air thick with anticipation. She called an emergency HOA meeting, her voice a trumpet of desperation, hoping to reclaim her crown. I arrived, not as a board member, but as a witness to her reckoning. Karen stood at the center, her sun hat a flimsy shield, her papers a sword she no longer wielded. She paced, ranting about faulty vendors, sabotage, her eyes darting like a cornered beast. "This isn't my fault," she cried, her pearls trembling like stars about to fall. The crowd was silent, their trust a withered vine. I sat at the edge, my heart a drum of justice. watching her empire crack. She glanced at me, her gaze a dart, but she didn't name me. Not yet. She couldn't. To admit she'd taken my wood was to confess her theft, and Karen was a queen who'd rather burn than bow. But the termites had spoken, their droppings a carpet of truth at her pergola's base. Neighbors whispered, their voices a tide, and I felt the ground shift. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a trial, and Karen was no longer judge. Could she talk her way out of this? Or was her throne already dust? The board was done with Karen's theatrics. Janet from Elm Street rose like a prosecutor, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Karen," she said, "this is the third structural failure in your yard. Maybe it's not the vendors, maybe it's the wood." The crowd inhaled, the air electric. Karen's face flushed, her pearls glowing like embers. "I don't have termites," she snapped, her voice a whip. "Someone brought them." Her eyes flicked to me, a silent accusation, but she faltered, her lie a rope fraying under truth's weight. Then Janet struck again, pulling out a folder. A guillotine of evidence. "You used HOA funds for your parties," she said, her words a hammer. "Tables, catering, decorations, all signed by you without board approval." Screenshots flashed on her phone, Karen's digital signature a confession in black and white. The crowd gasped, neighbors leaning forward, their trust in her a shattered mirror. Karen stammered, "That was approved," but Janet's reply was ice. "No, Karen, that was you." 3 board members nodded, their silence a verdict. The termites had carved the path, but this was the blow. Her empire wasn't just rotting, it was built on betrayal. How could a queen rule when her crown was stolen gold?
The meeting turned into a reckoning. Karen's thrown a pile of splinters. Harold, the board's elder, stood, his voice a gavel. "We call for a vote of no confidence," he said, each word a stone in her grave. Silence fell, then a hand rose, then another, then dozens, a forest of dissent. Even her allies looked away, their loyalty a ghost. Karen's face was a storm, her eyes wide, her voice a scream. "You'll regret this. No one will maintain standards without me." But the crowd was unmoved, her hands a tide sweeping her away. The vote was unanimous, her reign over in a heartbeat. She stood, trembling, her sun hat a fallen crown, her papers scattered like leaves in a gale. The termites had weakened her foundation, but the board had toppled her tower. Neighbors murmured, some filming, others whispering about termites crawling in daylight. Karen spun, seeing the bugs on her pergola, their white bodies a confession she couldn't deny. "I don't have termites," she cried, but her voice cracked, a queen dethroned. I sat silent, my heart a bonfire of justice. She'd stolen my wood, my pride, but I'd given her something greater, consequences. Did she think she could outrun truth? Not anymore.
Karen stormed out, her screams about lawsuits a fading echo, but no one followed. The meeting ended with applause, not of joy but of relief, a community exhaling after years of her reign. Janet took the helm, promising pest control, audits, fairness. I walked home, the sun warm, my soul light. Karen's backyard was a ruin, its pergola warped, its gate a skeleton. The termites had done their work, but the board had finished it, stripping her of power, pride, privacy. Neighbors talked openly now,
sharing stories of her finds, for grass clippings, for holiday lights, for a pink flamingo she called visual pollution. Her empire was dust, her legacy a cautionary tale. I stood at my fence, watching pest control trucks arrive, their drills a requiem for her kingdom. She'd thought herself a queen, but queens fall when their thrones are hollow. The neighborhood buzzed, not with fear, but with hope, a tide turning under new skies. Karen's downfall wasn't just my victory, it was ours, a community reborn. But was her story truly over? Or did she have one last card to play? The day ended with Karen's absence, her backyard a graveyard of her ambition. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, the neighborhood alive with whispers of change. Janet's leadership was a breeze, cool and steady, sweeping away Karen's storm. The termites had been my spark, but the truth had been the fire, burning her empire to ash. She'd stolen my wood, thinking it a small victory, but it was her undoing. A trap she'd built with her own hands. I didn't need to shout or fight. The termites and the board had spoken for me. Neighbors smiled now, their voices, their yards blooming with defiance, wind chimes, gnomes, unchained joy. Karen's fall wasn't just a loss, it was a lesson. Power built on theft crumbles. Crowns forged in arrogance melt. I leaned back, the sun a promise, my heart a song. She'd thought herself invincible, her HOA code a shield. She didn't know truth is a blade no shield can stop. The neighborhood was healing, but Karen's shadow lingered, a ghost in her own house. Would she vanish quietly or return with a final roar? I didn't know, but I was ready. My woodpile a symbol, my peace a fortress. The neighborhood woke like a garden after a storm, its colors brighter, its air sweeter. Karen's fall wasn't just an end, it was a beginning, a chance for roots to grow where her shadow once loomed. I stood on my porch, coffee steaming, watching kids chalk the sidewalks, their laughter a melody of freedom. Wind chimes sang, garden gnomes stood proud, and even Rick, the grumpy corner lot guy, waved, a miracle in itself. Janet's HOA was a breeze, not a gale, her meetings a circle.
Not a throne. The termites had carved the path, but the community had walked it, reclaiming their voice, their yards, their peace. Karen's backyard was a ghost, its pergola gone, its lights dim, pest control trucks a funeral for her reign. I smiled, my woodpile reborn, stacked on bricks, a monument to justice.
Painters passed, snapping photos of my sign, not for HOA use or termites. Their laughter was a chorus, binding us closer. Karen had ruled with fear, her HOA code a chain. Now the chains were broken, the garden free to bloom. But what becomes of a queen without a crown? Does she fade or fight? I sipped my coffee, the morning a promise, my heart a hearth where justice burned bright. Karen was a ghost now, her house a shell, her voice silent. Privacy panels rose along her fence, a flimsy shield against shame. Neighbors shared stories of her reign, fines for invisible grass, for holiday lights hung a day early, for a flamingo she deemed a crime. Each tale was a brick, building a wall between her past and our present. But her shadow lingered, a chill in the air. One morning a county inspector knocked, his badge a reminder of her reach. Karen filed a complaint, he said, claiming your woodpile caused her termite damage. I laughed, the absurdity a spark. Even in defeat she swung, blaming me, neighbors, anyone but herself. The inspector checked my yard, nodded, and left, his smile tired. She threw a lot of people under the bus, he said. I shared this with Janet, who rolled her eyes. She reported my corgi as a menacing breed, she muttered. Another neighbor chimed in, her gnome was a gang symbol. Karen's pettiness was a wildfire, burning bridges as she fled. But fires die and hers was fading. The neighborhood was alive, its pulse strong, its laughter a shield. Could her lies outrun the truth? Not here, not now.
Then came the day Karen vanished. A realtor's sign sprouted in her yard, discreet but damning. Online listings mentioned structural work needed, a polite nod to her termite tomb. Word spread, her husband took a job out of state, or maybe they just needed to escape. The moving truck arrived, and no one helped.
Neighbors watched from windows, some toasting quietly, others whispering her name like a curse. I stood at my fence, watching them load her kingdom's remnants, chairs, lights, her pride. Karen saw me, her face small, tired, human for a fleeting moment. I almost pitied her, but memory was a blade, her wave, her theft, her laughter. Pity vanished like smoke. We locked eyes, no words, no waves, just silence. A book closing. She climbed into her car, sunglasses hiding her defeat, and drove away. The truck followed, its rumble a requiem for her reign. The neighborhood exhaled, its heart lighter, its scars healing. Karen was gone, her empire dust, her legacy a warning carved in termite trails. What does a queen do when her throne is gone? She fades, and we bloom.
A week later, the neighborhood threw a block party, not to celebrate Karen's exit, but it felt like it. Burgers sizzled, balloons danced, a bounce house roared with kids' laughter. I brought hickory smoked ribs, their scent a nod to my stolen wood, now a symbol of triumph. Seasoned with justice, I joked, and neighbors laughed, their eyes bright with shared victory. We ate, we talked, we healed. Someone suggested a new gazebo, open to all, voted on, fairly, not Karen's private palace. I offered wood and the crowd roared, the irony a spark in our joy. The party stretched into dusk, stars winking like allies. I stood at my fence, watching the glow, my heart a hearth of peace. Karen's shadow was gone, her fines a memory, her fear a ghost. The neighborhood wasn't just back, it was better, its roots deeper, its branches free. But one last twist waited, a final note in her requiem. What could outshine a queen's fall, a relic buried in her own yard, ready to tell its tale? Months later, Karen's old house welcomed a new family, their pumpkin carving night a beacon of warmth. I joined, stepping onto her former kingdom, now reborn. Near the edge, I found it, a weathered HOA sign, half buried, its words a ghost. President reserves the right to appropriate community materials. Below, scratched crudely, were the words, including your soul. We laughed until tears fell, mounting the sign in the new gazebo as Exhibit A, a relic of her reign. The neighborhood thrived, its sidewalks alive, its yards unchained. Janet's HOA was fair, its meetings a circle of voices. I chopped new wood, planted roses where Karen's heels once struck, my piece a fortress. Karen's lesson was clear. Power built on theft crumbles, crowns forged in greed melt. She'd taken my wood, but I'd given her truth, carried on termite wings. One Sunday, I saw her car, her face hidden, staring at her lost empire. We locked eyes, her defeat a mirror, my silence a blade. She drove away, gone forever. I split a log, its crack a hymn of closure. The neighborhood bloomed, its heart free, its story ours. Did Karen learn her lesson? Maybe, but we learned ours. Justice is a fire, and sometimes all it takes is a termite and a neighbor who refuses to bow. Leave a comment below letting us know where you are watching from. And if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we will have another incredible story.